Hey, and welcome to another episode of I'll Go If You Go. I'm your host, Emily Harwitz. On today's episode, we're talking to water architect Daniela Peña Corvillon. If you're like me, you've probably never heard of a water architect before. That's because Daniela coined the term herself, after studying landscape architecture and realizing that water is a key defining element of any landscape. By shaping the way water flows, collects, and drains, you can shape the landscape itself. That process of sculpting the land is called grading, which is an important term in architecture and in this episode. I think this is a really cool way of thinking about it because it asks us to consider the natural flow of movement across the landscape, as well as the underlying processes that shape it. Daniela also has a background in design, and I love the artistic perspective she brings to this work, like at Arrau. Arrau is a Yurok name for a site right on Prairie Creek and in the middle of ancestral Yurok territory in Northern California. In the mid-1800s, settlers tried to remove the Yurok people from the land, and they established a lumber mill at the site to log trees, like the huge old-growth redwoods. It operated as a mill for more than 50 years and was known as the Oric Mill Site. In 2013, Save the Redwoods League purchased the site with the original vision of creating a Redwoods Visitor Center, but that vision has evolved into something new. Earlier this year, the Yurok Tribe, Save the Redwoods League, National Park Service, and California State Parks signed a historic agreement to transfer Arrau back to its original steward, the Yurok Tribe. Arrau will be co-managed by these four partners, making this the first time ever in National Parks and California State Parks history that they'll co-steward with a tribe on tribe-owned land. That's all I'm going to say for now, because Daniela gets into the juicy details in this episode. Oh yeah, and by the way, this conversation took place over the internet because at the time of recording, Daniela was in her home country of Chile. So without further ado, let's get to it. Daniela, how's it going?
Hi, Emily. Here very well. Thank you so much for inviting me.
I've heard of architects, I've heard of landscape architects, but this is the first time I've encountered water architect.
Water architect, it comes from traveling mostly in Chile, going through south to north and seeing the Andes mountain, coming, creating the valley and then the coastal mountain and then the ocean. And the landscape is very similar than California, so you can go from the desert to a deep forest. And I start to realize that that landscape was actually shaped in many ways by water. So I start to imagine water coming from the mountain and water coming from the ocean in different geological time and process, and that creates the space that we live in. Maybe on the coastal range looking to the ocean, or maybe just on the valley, be held in between the mountain. So as an architect, we construct the space where we live on. So we construct houses that are shelter, right? Or even spaces outside that hold us. So how I moved from architecture to ecology, my deep intention was understanding like the water system so I can understand the deep ecology and also like figure out where us as a human, we belong in this system. Maybe it's a little complicated, but that's how I call water architect because I work on the space of the territory, of the landscape, and that's why.
That's really cool. So because water shapes the landscapes that it flows through, by altering the course of water flow or by directing water to flow, you're then helping water to shape the landscape in a way that's ecologically sound for the location.
Right, and also like water is a big component of the different type of ecosystem. For example, like on the redwood forest, like the sequoias and perseverance of the coastal redwood, they like to be like in wet areas, right? So water is a component of that ecosystem. Even if we don't see it, that root system are in areas where water like to be pond under the soil or like in areas that are very wet. There is different of other type of ecosystem, for example, like the grassland, that water kind of absorb very quickly, and is more exposed to the sun. So I feel like water is also a component of the environment that we live in. And it's kind of like something that sometimes we don't see it. We see creek and rivers, but water is present in every single ecosystem and define them.
Can you give me an example of what it looks like to work with water?
The person that works with water is a person that works with grading. We grade or regrade the site, so we kind of help water run in the system in different ways. One example, in the Redwood National Park, in the project that we have been working the most intensive is in Oric, where is a confluence of Redwood Creek and Prairie Creek. That site had been disturbed during many years and had been the floodplain of the river had been flattened. So there is not a slope. So the water and how the river overflow the floodplain, that don't creating so much diversity. So the river don't create this multiple connection and different level. Us, as a water architect, to say it in some way, have been regrading the site with the engineers to create different ecosystem along that floodplain with different slope and different dimensions, so different plant and habitat can establish during all of that floodplain. So we create diversity by giving different slope and different momentum for the water to pond, to run, to don't create erosion or maybe create erosion, but mostly no, it's just kind of thinking how the water will run during the rain.
And the site you're talking about, that's Orao?
Yes, that's Orao.
That's cool. I really see where the architect part comes into this because you're shaping and building up the land. And as you create those different elevations in the landscape, the water can either flow faster or it can spread out. And like you said, when the water is able to spread out across its floodplain, then you can sink water into the ground. So the ground can stay moist for plants and promote vegetation biodiversity. And then that begets wildlife biodiversity because then it creates habitat for more different animals to come in.
Exactly. So water architect is really reshaping the land, essentially.
I want to hear more about this designer element to your work. When you said you were the first designer, does that mean you're bringing a more artistic lens to it, or do you mean design thinking?
I went to my master program with already a professional degree in architecture. And all my classmates, they were coming from hydrology, ecology, geology. So I think I was the first from the artistic side going into a science.
That's very cool. How do you think that informs your perspective and makes your work different than someone who came from the scientific side?
Even the most scientific project, I will say, they happen because there is a kind of human component or economical component or artistic component that help the project to be real. So it's a win-win on this matching in between artists and science.
I agree 100%. Can you provide an example of a project that you're proud of?
Well, I call my baby project, but my favorite project is what we are doing in Oric with Save the Redwood League. I feel that project is, from all my experience internationally and in California, is the most progressive project. Today, that land has been given back to the Yurok tribe. It's a land that has been recovered after years of abuses. That site, it was the mill where they cut millions of giant redwood on all of that coast. And today that site has been treated like restoring the whole ecology, providing us as a human access to there, learn about that, and giving back to a community. Something that I love about the Yurok when we start to work on that project, when the Europeans came and say to the Yurok people, say, hey, who owns this land? They say, no one. Because in their concept, in their mind, they don't own the land owns them. So they work daily to maintain the lands in a healthy way. So the land allow them to continue living there. And I found that beautiful, and the community there and the people that I have the chance to be working with them, their daily life, they do that. And it's just amazing. And the other thing that amazed me about the Yurok and the all coastal redwood north in California is I come from probably the same world that we all live, that we have the north, we have the south, we have the east, and we have the west, right? And we oriented in that way. But the Yurok, no. The Yurok people oriented by how the water runs. So it's downriver, upriver. And that is really interesting because, again, it comes the component of the water and understanding a water as a basic system, the essence of the land in many ways. And the main growth, many of them are in this land where the soil are so spongy. I don't know if you feel when you walk on the wall and the redwood that sometimes it feel so soft and nice. It's because all of this root system is like a big sponge. So restoration of that site and also see what Save the Redwood League have been done in terms of navigating this project as a public project and with different agency and different component and changing so many times, different things, it really amazed me because I think it's a great team that have been making this dream real. And we will all have access to that sacred land in a very beautiful place.
That's a really exciting project. And Daniela, I want to hear more about the restoration of the site. How do you go about planning water restoration as a water architect?
Well, first I need to say it's not all my work. This is a team of people. But let me tell you a story. When the first time we went there to work with the architect, we were going to do like a new visitor center for Redwood National Park that Save the Redwood League was going to give this site to them. And so we go there for a workshop and we are meeting with the people of the community. And in that workshop, we learned something, that everything was about salmon. No one kind of was mentioning the tree. And I remember the architect was like, wow, like, now what? Like we are working for the redwood forest, but everything's about salmon. And then you realize how is this life system that is so alive in that part of the world where the redwood are correlated with the salmon because they provide essential habitat. And it's been beautiful to see how this finally salmon habitat restoration that happened in this floodplain that have been restored is the basis of the ecology to restore from the center of the creek to a forest, a whole habitat with different type of species, from the elk to the salmon, to the bear, to us as a human to have access to see it, to explore, to enjoy it. It just is magical. And so that process was a lot of regrading. So we were working mostly like passing contour line from landscape architecture to engineer, incorporating architecture as well. So we kind of designed the entrance sequence of us as a human and promoting better habitat for different type of species and plant species as well. There is another project that I like to be called water architect, even if we didn't do so much thing of water, but create access to Bridal Fall. On the Yosemite Valley, there is millions of visitors, and some of the paths need to be upgraded to accommodate more people and also like decrease the footprint of the path or the impact of us human. So for that specific project, we were working in accessibility and creating all of that kind of entrance sequence. First project that we got in Yosemite was because the public sent the park to a court for bad treating the river. So they create Merced River Master Plan in order to protect the river. In that master plan, they were requesting to remove all the infrastructure that was on the floodplain to upper areas. So we have to move like around 700 parking spaces from the floodplain and put it in other areas. And that project was very fun because we create, this is in the village and in the lot. And specifically in the village, imagine like 720 parking, it was like so many, plus all the buses that you need to accommodate and everything. But you also create the arrival point, so when you imagine Yosemite is kind of far away from almost everyone, you arrive, the first thing you want to go to a bathroom. So, okay, arrive to a bathroom, but you also want to see Half Dome or like Yosemite Fall, so like create that initial perception, and from that kind of invite people to take trail. Is challenging when you are surrounded by trees and you don't want to cut the trees.
Mm-hmm. I really see where the art and design element comes in, because you have to think about like what is the human experience of this, and like you said, designing the arrival point. How do you welcome people in a way that they feel like, okay, this is accessible, I feel safe here, but also introduce them to the awe and just connection to nature that they get from these places.
Yeah, it's very challenging, especially like in such a big area, or when you get so many visitors and you want to bring people in an intimate connection with nature, right? I mean, You want to feel like in the shopping mall parking lot but being in Yosemite. So we work that in two scale. One is trying to understand that the footprint that we are placing in this place is connected with the large view, the large opening, or some type of what the landscape is telling you where to look and feel it. And also with the small scale that is connected people with the detail. For example, like there are trees that are just stunning, and you want to feel people like see that. So you make sure that the trail push you to see that, or creating shelter under some trees. In some of the project also we know like where the birds are nesting or some type of other animal that we want to protect. So we want to give some kind of connection of human with the nature of the place without disturbing the place itself.
So would you say that's your favorite part of your job?
Yeah, so my favorite part is creating that connection of human with nature in all sense, from the understanding where the sun rises to where the water is going, to, like the seasonal changes of the forest or the garden, because I think we are all missing a little bit that connection with nature.
Yeah. So you've mentioned a project up in the Redwoods at Orao, you've mentioned Yosemite, you've mentioned Patagonia. What's the commonality between these projects and all these far away and sometimes local community places?
The common is what we are talking, that is the connection between human and nature. And the second is all of that places are open for the public. This are not private land. This is for everyone. And that is also like an important component, because we all need to have access to that, no matter like property line, and we all belong in this planet.
Switching topics a little bit, what do you remember most about your first experience with the Redwoods?
Well, I got to know Redwood to the National Geographic, the magazine. I was just graduating from the architecture department here in Chile, and my partner at that moment in business want to do green walls. So we are in this new journey of like transform the city to be green, and we want to do the walls green. So that means it's vertical gardens, and it's very complex and it's very difficult. And Jacinta came with a National Geographic magazine that opened for a big redwood. And she showed me the redwood and say, this tree have different species growing at different height of the tree. If this tree can do it, we can do it. And at that moment, immediately the redwood went very deep on me, and I started to like kind of research about them, understanding the water running on the redwood, like understanding the fog, understanding also like the high, how like the redwood take water from the bottom, but because it gets heated on the top, it moves the water pump out. So the region of the redwood is a correlation in between the fog and how much the redwood go out or like up. So like it's all of this about the water. So since the beginning, they were like my teachers. We call in Spanish maestro, but they were my professors. So that was my first experience, just through a magazine. And then as soon as I went into California, I go to see Muirwood, and what I can say, I just love it. The color, the texture, the ferns, they are here to help us to do this transition and be more green and keep them alive.
Hearing you describe that makes me think that redwoods are like water architects too, because they suck water up from the ground. Their root systems, sometimes they provide homes for baby salmons when the creeks run through. They also capture fog from the air.
Yeah, I think they're amazing. And my hope, the first time I went to see ORIC in North California, we went through like a small airplane. So I got to see all the transition from the oak woodland of the Bay Area to a deep redwood on the north. And I also saw like all of these forests that have been cut, right? So you see first the alders and this first generation redwood. And I feel redwood is not a tree. I feel Redwood is an ecosystem, it's a family, it's a forest. The root system are there and they are all connected and they are going to recover. And I feel like they are going to continue teaching us about being a community, our understanding that we are not a solo, that we are because we have surrounded element that make us to be who we are. I think we need to love them and we need to protect them and we need to enjoy them.
How do science-based conservation efforts come into play with park designs? Like, I'm wondering at what stage do you incorporate that and to what degree does it inform your designs?
Since the beginning, I think science and conservation are going together. I think like through science or through the knowledge of science are also like kind of a lot of funding for the project coming through as well. So when we think in a place before to do anything that we want or we wish or we need, we just want to see what the place itself it is. And we will use any resources. We will use scientific resources, we will use community knowledge, we will use historical element, anything that can tell us what the place itself it is, because the place changed over years. And what we are seeing today is much more complex of that. So we need to understand the process of how that place had been constructed and help into that process for like a resilient space.
And now we've reached the lightning round part of the episode. Daniela, are you ready? Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right, first question. If you could work in another capacity in the outdoors, what would you do?
I would like to help people to go into the water. Anything from like river guiding, helping to swim, playing on the beach, anything that is related with people and water. I feel like sometimes we carry so much a structure that society have given us, and I feel like the water is so playful. So I would like to be kind of an outdoor guide or an outdoor therapy. I don't know, but something that we can just jump into the water.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Water is so playful. You're right.
Yeah, and it's always different.
Yeah, you never look at the same river twice. Or no, what is that saying? You never step into the same river twice.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
So question number 2. If you were a redwood, where would you be and why?
You need to help me with the pronunciation of the Orao site.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. In that intersection of Redwood Creek and Prairie Creek in close to Oric, I found that place my favorite place. It's just, you can see the ocean, you are surrounded by this forest, the salmon are running to this beautiful Prairie Creek. I mean, it just seems like magical. You got both things, like kind of the coastal sun exposition and the forest protection. And I would like to be there. A little, not next to a creek, a little more up, but with a good sun exposition, looking to the ocean and refreshing by all my forests around me.
Sounds like a beautiful life.
Yeah.
I'll come visit you. All right, and last question. You're going to spend a day in the Redwoods. What are 3 things you're bringing with you?
Well, I will bring time because I like to relax. I don't want to like be pushing myself that I need to leave. No, when I am in the Redwood, I like to feel it. I want to like sit in, not think about everything. I just want to like be there. So I don't want any stress. So I will go with time. That first. Second, I will bring some water and some food. I think because I just like to be comfortable. I really like nuts. So I eat a lot of different nuts because it's easy to carry and just kind of give me energy and I need.
What kind of food?
But yeah, anything that can be a little salty, crunchy, and filling will be great.
Yeah. Well, sounds like a fun time. You're all set for a day in the Redwoods. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Daniela. It was really fascinating to hear about what you do as a water architect and your perspective on working with nature to help bring those connection points to people.
Thank you so much for inviting me. And I hope we can both go to experience maybe the Montgomery Grove. They have water that feel like no one have been there and just laugh and enjoy it and get inspired by that beautiful ecosystem.
Yeah, that sounds lovely. I'll go if you go.
Yeah, we go together, we go better. Gracias, buenas noches. Ciao.
Thanks for joining us on I'll Go If You Go, a Save the Redwoods League podcast. This season is produced by Leslie Parra and hosted, edited, and sound engineered by Emily Harwitz. Thank you to Adam Kaplan for tech support, and Caleb Castle, Marcos Castañeras, and Mary McFeely for graphic design and media support. Theme song and music are by Nu Nguyen and Annie Fung. You can find seasons 1, 2, and 3 wherever you listen to podcasts or on SaveTheRedwoods.org, where you can also find transcripts of each episode. If you like our show, please rate and review. It helps more people find us and join in the conversation. For behind the scenes and bonus content, follow us on Instagram at I'll Go If You Go Pod. If you have comments or questions, you can email us at outreach@SaveTheRedwoods.org. We'd love to hear from you and maybe even share your comments on the podcast. And that's all, folks. Catch you next time.